All right, I show 8:30, and we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And Karen, I think we'll need to start the recording here, so we'll wait until
this meeting is being recorded and/or transcribed.
All right, I think we are good to go. My name is Kevin Monroe, and I serve as the current chairman of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy. Today is Tuesday, July 26th, and I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy. This regularly scheduled meeting is taking place in room 1B of the Davy Crockett Tower at 500 James Robertson Parkway in Nashville, Tennessee. The meeting date and time and location have been properly noticed, and copies of the agenda were posted to the board's website on July 15, 2022. Karen, if you will, go ahead and perform a roll call. We do have some members that are participating remotely and some that are physically present.
Andy Bonner.
Here.
Janet Booker Davis.
Here.
Pamela Church.
Here.
David Crenshaw.
Here.
John Griesbeck.
Here.
Kevin Monroe.
Present.
Gay Moon.
Here.
Rob Vance.
Here.
Judy Weatherby.
Here.
Larry Elmore.
Here.
Thank you, and that confirms we do have a physical quorum of the board present in the room as required. And we appreciate also those that are calling in remotely. We have one board member who has a medical appointment this morning and may be dialing in subsequently. And if so, we'll welcome him at the time he calls in. In terms of announcements, I would just like to welcome Sveta Todorova Kelly with us. She will be joining us as part of the legal team and is taking on the role of Associate General Counsel and will be working with our board in this and future matters today. I'd like to also remind board members to use their microphones when speaking, and for those on the phone, please remain on mute unless speaking. I'd like to welcome any members of the public that are physically present here, so thank you for being here, as well as those perhaps hundreds or thousands that are watching the live stream of our broadcast. We welcome that as well, and we hope that it becomes even a more well-viewed event here. The next item on the agenda is to review and adopt the agenda, which was posted on July 15th. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Thank you, Andy. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the agenda? None. Karen, will you please call the roll on that motion?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. The next item is the approval of the minutes from our May 3rd, 2022 regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion. Thank you, Robert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Andy. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion with respect to the minutes from that meeting? Hearing none, Karen, will you please call the roll on the motion to approve the minutes?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Crenshaw.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
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 Weatherby. Aye. Hi, Larry.
Oh, aye. Sorry.
Thank you. The motion passes with respect to the approval of the meeting minutes. The next item on the agenda is the Executive Director's report, and for that, we'll turn it over to our Executive Director, Wendy Garvin.
Thank you. Our packet of material, Executive Director. The first item on that report is our future meeting dates. The first four have already been approved, and then I have a proposed date there for Thursday, October 19th, 2023. Now, this is outside of our normal Monday, Tuesday, because that room over there is booked on our normal days. And it's with the Motor Vehicle Commission. We currently share attorneys. And so we could certainly be in this room, but we'd have more difficulty with the attorneys. So I thought we could pick another date if y'all were willing. Most other dates are available after the 15th of October, but we also need to do it before the 30th or so because Nasba usually has their annual meeting. So we're kind of tight in there. But this would be a Wednesday, Thursday, so in October 18th and 19th. Does anyone have concerns? We could also do a Thursday, Friday, which is our old format. So I'll let y'all take a look, maybe. I know this is quite a bit in the future, but.
I've got a conflict on that Wednesday. I've got a board meeting
Okay.
at the bank, which would
Okay.
cause me to have to virtually come in.
So maybe Thursday, Friday might be
Thursday,
better.
Friday would work better for me.
Wednesdays are generally not good for me.
Okay. Okay.
I
Thursday,
have
Friday
a lot of
sounds.
meetings.
Okay, so Thursday, Friday sounds like a better option. We could obviously do the previously Monday, Tuesday, but I think Monday's that tax deadline. Monday's the 16th.
Work better for me. I'm out of town on the 19th through the 21st in
Okay.
meetings, but I don't, if everybody else is comfortable with the Thursday and Friday of the 20th and 21st, that's fine too.
Anyone have a preference? I'm not sure now that we have too many doing tax work. Do we?
Not here.
So we could do the 16th and 17th if y'all want to.
Would that be the 17th and 18th, Monday and Tuesday?
Yes, I'm 16th and 17th.
Oh, okay.
Should be of 2023.
I'm sorry.
I prefer to stay away from those dates.
I forgot. I'm sorry, Janet. Janet is still doing tax work.
So actually, I'm not out of town as far as I know in 2023. I was looking at 2022.
Okay.
My bad.
Oh, yeah.
So for me,
Okay.
that Thursday and Friday would be fine.
All right. Well, why don't we do that then? We'll do the October 20th will be the board meeting. And if we get to a point where someone's got a major conflict, we can also revisit and reschedule if needed, but that's what we'll plan on. And we'll vote on that at the end of the report. So that's okay. Next in the report is just a listing of upcoming Nasba meetings. Their annual meeting is October 30th through November 2nd in San Diego. Our current budget allows for 5 board members plus myself to attend that meeting. They are going to open that registration, I understand, in a couple of weeks. So I need to get some input from those that are interested in going. I think we're going to need Andy and Larry to go because of their positions on Nasba's board. So those, and then there'll be 3 more spots for those that are interested. So please let me know as soon as possible.
And but I think we'll cover 2 if we end up having more, because they usually will cover whatever is not covered by the state.
So they do, however, our legal counsel has determined that we can't accept that because of the contract we have with CPACE.
Okay.
So we just typically avoid that.
I tried to get that
Yeah.
so we could have more people.
Yeah. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Judy. Hopefully we'll be able to get everybody that wants to go.
I would like to know if, and they may not know now, but what are they doing with requiring vaccinations and all that stuff?
I can update you on that. We still have a policy for the annual meeting in NASBA that's going to say that you still have to be vaccinated. And the definition of that is if you have a card that you have the vaccination. It doesn't say plus booster or double booster or anything like that. But it's also being kind of talked about right now that this will be the last time that they have that requirement. that
Maybe I can go in the future.
Yeah, so next year, they're anticipating, if everything goes right, that it'll be open back up to where everybody can go regardless of, because I think that the theory there was it's the people who didn't get the vaccination that are at risk the most. And so they seem to be leaning towards, well, everybody's had their chance. We kind of selectively covered it where we think we were safe, and now the world's opening up and we need to too. So.
All right. Send me an email or let me know during a break or something if you're interested in attending the annual meeting this year. Communications. On June 24th, we distributed the spring summer newsletter to all licensees via email. It's also posted on the front page of our website. And one thing that we did include this time, which we have not included in the past, was a listing of all candidates who passed the entire exam on their first try last year, kind of related to some comments you've made, Pam. So we did a shout out to those individuals in that edition. As far as the exam, the Elijah Watt Sells Award was announced on May 19th, 2022. This is an AICPA award that's given to CPA candidates who obtain an average score of 95.5 across all 4 sections of the exam and completed all their testing in 2021. So there were more than 72,000 individuals that sat for the exam in 2021, and only 57 candidates met the criteria. We had 2 winners from Tennessee. Victoria Heavey is a graduate of the University of Tennessee with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration and a Master of Accountancy, and she's employed with KPMG in Dallas, Texas. And Reynolds Spencer, a graduate of the University of Mississippi with a Bachelor of Accountancy and Masters of Accountancy, is employed with EY here in Nashville, Tennessee. So we did highlight them in the newsletter as well. So congratulations to those 2 individuals. A lady by the name of Mamie Brinkley reached out to me. She is a public accountant. She's one of our 9 remaining public accountants. And she wanted to share with the board a tribute to a fellow CPA that she had worked with for 32 years. And I have attached that to the document here just so it's part of the record, and also added it to that particular license file so it will stay within the records. But it was a nice tribute to someone she had worked with and admired for a very long time. So I have let her know that I shared that with you all. The CP audit is underway. We reached out to 578 individuals in May. The deadline to respond is August 1st, so we are still working on that. And you have a snapshot in your document here of where we are related to the audit. I will say we're a little behind in response, but we're very high in compliance. So those who have responded are very compliant so far. We have 281 compliant. 2 non-compliant so far, 14 compliant with carryover, 7 compliant with penalty hours. We have 5 that have a home state exemption. And as of this date, there were 88 in process, but of course that number fluctuates depending on the day and how many we receive. So we have a response rate of 68.57% and a compliance rate of 99%. So we're doing well so far. Outreach. Chairman Monroe spoke to TSCPA's council in June at their annual convention and gave an update from the board. And one item I didn't note here, but Sherry worked with Perry Moore. Y'all might have noticed in TSCPA's journal, there was an article on kind of a review of enforcement that this board has taken in the past year. And Sherry, this is the 2nd year she's worked with Perry on developing that type of article to share with the licensees what types of things have come before this board and what kind of actions were taken to help educate the licensees on items to avoid. So that would be considered another outreach type item. Then we go into performance metrics. We have had IT challenges for months, so this number goes up and down, but we do have average number of days to license. You'll see the last 3 months there, we've ranged from 4.7 days to 15.7 days, depending on the month and what we've got going on. Case and complaint performance, we still are above the goal of 90%, in which we have 96% of our cases are resolved within 180 days or 6 months. And then online adoption rate, that's how many individuals apply for licenses online versus sending paper in. So we have a really good process for doing almost anything you need to do online. And then your last section there is number of licenses issued. We are a little behind in the first 2 quarters this year. We're at 260 individuals and 25 permits. You'll see at the bottom, I think I grabbed this graph that Karen had done to kind of show you in graph format what it looks like as far as new licenses issued by year. So hopefully we'll pick up a little bit in the late half of this year. And I also added just after that a little table there which shows the number of new candidates sitting for the CPA exam by year, going back to 2017. So you will see there that our number of new candidates choosing to sit for the exam is slowly dropping year by year, which I don't think is a surprise, but this is just the data to show y'all. And then licensing population still does tick up year over year, so that's good news there. And that's all I have for the Executive Director's report. If you have any questions, happy to take those.
Thank you, Wendy. Any questions or comments? Appreciate the update on the report. So we do have one action item stemming from that report, which is the approval of the new meeting date that would take place in October of 2023. And it looked like we had consensus on Friday, October 20th, 2023 for our board meeting date, which means the committee date would be the day before. Is there a motion to approve that date?
So moved.
Thank you, John. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Thank you, David. Any further discussion or comment on that date? Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner. Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Glenn Shaw.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Lynn Monroe.
Aye.
Aye.
Bob Vance.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you, Karen. The next item that we have on the agenda is a reinstatement application presentation for Mr. James Bickmore. I think as most of the board members know, but just for those who are watching, when we have a reinstatement situation, the board protocol basically calls for that to be handled over 2 meetings. The first meeting will deal with the acceptability of the application itself. It is not a substantive decision on reinstatement. It is simply a determination as to whether all of the factors relevant to the application are present and that the application is ready to proceed for consideration of the substance of the issue at the next succeeding meeting. So for this reinstatement application, this is the first meeting, and we are looking primarily at the completeness of the application and its compliance with the board's rules governing those applications and the discipline in this particular matter. So Wendy, if I may, I'll turn it over to you for a little bit of further explanation, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Sure. Thank you. What I'm going to do is just kind of go over the basics of this and then let y'all ask questions. Mr. Bickmore currently has a suspended license. That license was suspended in December 2020 as a result of a consent order by which he signed and agreed to the suspension. And the actions for which he was disciplined for, I'm going to get to the okay, so he was found for having violations of fiscal dishonesty, which falls under the conduct reflecting adversely to the licensee's fitness to perform services, and then also for willfully failing to file a report or record required by the state or federal law and making or filing such report which one knows to be false. And just to kind of go over the findings of fact in that particular case, the licensee purchased an airplane in December of 16 and purchase price of that airplane was $128,500. The sale of that airplane was not reported to the Tennessee Department of Revenue by either the respondent or the seller at the time of the sale. On February 20th, 2018, the Department of Revenue sent an inquiry letter to the respondent requesting documentation to support the purchase of the airplane. Respondent signed an affidavit stating the purchase price of the airplane was $18,500 and included a copy of the aircraft purchase agreement showing the same purchase price. Respondent included a check for $1,375 for the applicable sales tax. In March of 18, Department of Revenue sent another letter to the seller, which the seller returned and signed affidavit stating the sales price of the airplane was actually $128,500. In November of 18, the respondent reported the correct purchase price and calculated a total sales tax of $9,075 and deducted the amount already paid. After the investigation by the Tennessee Department of Revenue, respondent was charged with one count of filing false sales tax return. The charge was expunged, but the board found violations of fiscal dishonesty and the willful filing of a false report. And as a result of that, the individual was ordered to a suspension of the license, a $2,000 civil penalty, and the completion of the 3-part Nasba ethics course. So the documents you have today show that the payment of $2,000 was received, as well as the certificate for the ethics course. So the application appears to be complete, and we do have proof that the actions required by the consent order have been taken. So it is staff and legal's recommendation that this application be accepted for presentation at the October meeting.
Thank you for that background explanation. Are there any comments or questions at this time?
I have a question. I work with Rowan, the attorney. Should I recuse myself for that? Or, I mean, I have no knowledge of what he's doing for this defendant. But
I don't think so, but does anyone have a...
I am not sure as far as legal goes, but I will look into it and let Wendy know and let the rest of you know.
But I'd rather not take a chance if there's a possibility.
Yeah, I would. You may want to consider abstaining from the vote for now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we will get kind of more details back and forth with you and legal so they can better understand the fact pattern.
Thank you.
And we'll go from there. Again, we're not making a substantive decision on reinstatement today. We're simply accepting the application as complete and ready for presentation in October. Typically, in the past, what we've done is we've also asked the respondent to, appear either virtually or in person at these meetings. We understand that he's represented by counsel, and so certainly counsel is welcome to accompany the respondent as well. Is it the board's preference to have the respondent appear in person or virtually at the October meeting?
I think it would be appropriate that he would be attending.
We will, I guess what I would do then is frame the motion that we would accept Mr. Bickmore's reinstatement application and that we request that he appear for the October meeting where the reinstatement discussion will take place with the board.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Andy. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second as well. Is there any further comment or discussion? And again, Judy will abstain from this vote. Karen, if you will, please call the roll.
Andy Bonner. Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. The next item on the agenda is a good moral character review with respect to Ms. Elizabeth Snyder. And just to confirm, Ms. Snyder, are you in the room present? Thank you. For for this one, Wendy, I'll ask you to briefly introduce the matter, and then we'll proceed.
I will briefly introduce it. I'm going to turn it over to Sveta to
That's
go
fine.
through her memorandum, but we have Ms. Snyder has applied for an initial license with the board and provided information on a disciplinary matter she had with the Louisiana Board of Nursing. And so I'm going to have Sveta go from here.
Thank you, Wendy. So to start, just also want to cover some of what Wendy already said. So Ms. Snyder is currently seeking a CPA licensure approval from the board. She has not previously, from what I'm aware of, applied or held the CPA license. The only professional license that she has had is one of nursing from Louisiana. In 2014, Snyder voluntarily surrendered her license. She was a registered nurse in Louisiana. She underwent formal disciplinary action, and by surrendering her license, she admitted to the following allegations. And I believe the board has the actual documentation as well, but these are the three that I believe pertain to our specific consideration today. The first one is forging a physician's signature on a physician's order. The second one is administering the medication without having a physician's order and committing patient abuse by restraining a patient. The third one is showing a pattern of rude and disruptive behavior toward coworkers, patients, and visitors. So as a result, Ms. Snyder voluntarily surrendered her license. She was prohibited from practicing as a registered nurse for, I believe it's a minimum of 2 years. And subsequently, since then, she has earned bachelor's and master's degrees in accounting, and then submitted the application to become a CPA in Tennessee. Now, as far as the board's discretion and the legal authority to deny or not deny will be found in TCA section 62-1-106, and specifically in this case, it would be section 62-1-106 A and B. Section A talks about the statute requiring CPA to be granted to people of or individuals with good moral character, and that is further defined in subsection B as good moral character defined as lack of history of dishonest or felonious acts. Now, none of these admitted facts ended in a felony conviction or any criminal conviction of any kind, but they are noted, in our opinion, as acts of dishonesty. And so, per that, it is my opinion the board would have discretion to deny the application for licensure based on that. And that's really the gist of it. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. One of the other issues that I would just publicly state and bring to the board's attention before we get into the discussion here is that in addition to that kind of background from a legal perspective, we also have several character letters of reference subsequent to the time of the 2014 nursing situation that have been presented by contacts or employers of Ms. Snyder that are also included in our packet. So I want to make sure that those are appropriately considered. Wendy, do you have any further comments?
No, just to direct everybody that those are in the back, so they should be the last 3 documents, and those were received just within the past couple of weeks, so they are current.
Thank you. Ms. Snyder, first of all, thank you for taking the time to attend the meeting and to undergo this review with respect to your licensure, and congratulations on getting through your transition from nursing to an accounting education, both master's and undergraduate degree. If you would like to make any comments, I'd welcome you to just step up to the podium and we'll move the mic close and just speak closely into the microphone. And then if you're willing, board members may have questions that they would like to direct to you. Would that be all right? Okay. If you have any comments you'd like to make, you're welcome to make them at this time. Thank you for coming.
Just make sure that light's on.
I would like to. That's okay. These allegations that were brought against me were the findings of the State Board of Nursing for Louisiana. And while I do not negate them, what their findings are is what they are. However, the State Board sees things in very black and white. And my commentary, my version of events was not considered in that. I was a nurse for all of 2.5 years. All of these issues happened in those 2.5 years. And I would say that some of those things occurred due to lack of supervision, being a young nurse, and not having the best judgment at 23 years of age. I left nursing when that occurred. I had already moved to Tennessee, and I chose to forego moving back to Louisiana to comply with the consent order, pay the fine, and be subject to drug testing and psychiatric evaluation, even though there was no drug use involved on my part. I felt like a clean break, and surrendering my license was the best thing to do moving forward, and starting over. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of the instances that happened. The State Board, I think the language that they use is inflammatory, but also appropriate in their eyes, particularly the abuse and restraint of a patient. I would never use those terms. However, when you give a medication that alters their level of consciousness, it is considered restraint. And so I understand that those are the appropriate words. However, they bring to mind necessarily and may think restraint.
What I'll do, I have an opening question, then we'll open it up to any other board members who may have questions or commentary. One of the things that I noted as I reviewed the information that was presented to the board for its consideration is that essentially the events in question occurred in about 2014. And so subsequently, you changed your vocational career essentially from nursing to accounting. And the evidence from the very positive letters of reference that you have received for your employment with an employer here in Tennessee in a tax department have been very positive. And so the only question really that I have, Ms. Snyder, is one of the bedrock principles for CPAs, not only in Tennessee but everywhere with that credential, is the importance of honesty and integrity. And so that's why we're having this review, is to make that determination. And so I guess my question would be to make sure that you understand that as a CPA, if the board approves your licensure application, that is a fundamental principle or characteristic that we believe that CPAs must have.
Yes, sir. I disclosed this incident and the surrendering of my license prior to ever being hired by my employer back in 2016. I don't know if they documented it, but I did disclose it prior to a background check because it is considered public record. I have also disclosed it prior to ever sitting for my CPA exams to my head boss, Lee Grubbs, as well as to my AVP and my direct supervisor, on the off chance that I was either denied the ability to sit for my CPA or should it be brought to their attention elsewhere. I wanted them to be aware of my history, and so that they may make a educated decision on whether they wanted me to continue to be part of their team, given the goals for my career going forward.
Thank you. Do other board members have comments or questions? Pam? Use your mic as well.
Well, I commend you on what you have accomplished since obviously you have achieved success, and that took. You mentioned it seemed that you were referring to that time as a time of pressure in which an inexperienced, not terribly supervised, not closely supervised young person responded inappropriately. And you mentioned, of course, that you are older now, and we would assume a maturing process has happened. I guess what I want to ask is, certainly years do not by themselves lead to being able to handle this type of situation better. And I'd like to hear your reflections on how you approach difficult situations differently. And I'm sure you've put a lot of thought into this. Our profession can be a very stressful profession, and you often are working by yourself without a lot of supervision. And that's, to me, one mark of a professional is that that person acts with integrity, meaning acting the same way with high standards all the time. So all I'm asking you is, how have you grown and changed, and what thought have you put into this as far as how you are different now and will be going forward?
I would say that over the last 10 years, especially in the case of losing my license and my livelihood and my identity as a nurse, and having to start over has really caused me to step back and reevaluate what are the things that are most important. And the language used that the board described with my actions is shameful and hurtful, and I would never want anybody to ever think that I was capable of those things. And so in the last 10 years, going back to school and getting married and divorced and figuring out how to live on my own in a place where I don't have family, finding a career that I am passionate about and I enjoy going to work every day has made a world of difference for me. In the work environment, I work on a lot of very big projects for the company's return, and I find it to be when I hit those roadblocks where I'm unsure how to go forward or how to interpret maybe some of the code. I interpret it one way, and I don't think that maybe that's the correct way, or I have doubts about it. I work with colleagues that are very open about sitting down with me, discussing their opinions of it, working through those things, and being able to look at it from multiple different points of view, to come to a conclusion that is not only good for the company, but also conservative in its approach, and something that if I had to present it to our company's CFO, that I would feel comfortable answering any question he had and my reasoning behind it. And I feel like that started in pursuing my undergraduate degree at MTSU and the accounting staff there. That led me that way. And
thank you for that. I know that's a personal question, but it sounds like you have devoted a lot of thought and energy to learning from that experience. So thank you.
Pam, are there any other board member questions for Ms. Snyder?
I just want to say thank you for coming and being willing to stand in front of us. And you've been through a lot. And it's obvious that if you're willing to take this step, that you're committed to what you want to do, and no matter how hard it is. And I believe you've done the right thing by coming before us and answering questions. And I just commend you for that courage.
I don't want the mistakes of my youth and that lack of professionalism and understanding that you have when you're fresh out of college and you're immediately put into an environment where people's lives are in your hands, and it's very stressful, and the first thing on your mind is, I want to do what's right by my patient. And it is very hard for me to disclose to anybody what occurred with the state board. It's shameful. I regret the things that I did and the lack of consideration of my steps and actions. And I just hope that it will not continue to define me and my professional life, and that it can ask some people. And
I just have two comments. I'm in a family of two registered nurses. My wife is retired, and my daughter is currently a registered nurse, and she's at the 4-year mark right now, I believe. So I understand the pressures that you were under at the time, and so because I hear it, from coming from my family members. So there's that, and also in terms of the language that their state board used against you, in the world that I live in, I have things like that. We call them Dauber challenges filed against me every once in a while. And the incendiary language used, I understand if you lose that particular thing, that the language that gets adopted, whether it's really real or not. I understand that. And so if the harsh words used against you may not be completely accurate and applicable, but I understand the certain terms of art they may use, like restraint and that sort of thing. So obviously you understand that whatever it was you did was not correct. So I appreciate you changing your career and going down the path of whole new education, not really knowing if we would say yes or no. So I respect that.
Comments or questions? I think what I would emphasize also, Ms. Snyder, is that the letters, what I would call them character letters of reference from your current employer, I think there were at least 2, if not 3, different letters from individuals at your current employer that were glowing in their praises of you and in the work that you performed. And to me, that's one of the best demonstrations of what Dr. Church was getting at in terms of demonstrating since then how growth has occurred and maturing has occurred. And so to me personally, I think that's among the very best pieces of evidence that you could have submitted, and appreciate you and them doing so. If there are no further comments or questions, what I would do is solicit a motion that I think the appropriate motion here is that we would not consider the items arising from the 2014 license surrender, nursing license surrender, as a disqualifying element in your application. You would still be required to meet all of the other requirements, pass the exam, and have the appropriate education credentials, but that effectively the board will be voting on the fact that we do not consider these past actions to be disqualifying to your initial licensure application. And,
so moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe. Gay Moon. Aye. Rob Vance.
Aye.
Heather Weatherby.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously, and so as you complete the initial licensure application process, I would just wish you the best of luck and professionalism in your newly chosen career, and very much hope that, as you expressed, we can move forward and continue to have great success in this wonderful profession. We're glad you've chosen it. We're glad although sorry that it's been a hard road to this point. We're glad we're where we're at in this process, and thankful that you're enjoying your professional work and that your employer is supportive of you. And so we wish you the very best of luck, Ms. Snyder. You're welcome. Thank you. One of the things, I guess, to me that is a good learning point here is that it is important that that CPAs have good moral character, and particularly from an honesty perspective. And it's really great to also understand that everyone makes mistakes, and hopefully we learn from those, and just particularly happy with the outcome in this particular case. The next item that we have is our board committee reports. We'll start with the licensing report, and Pam Church is the chair of the licensing committee, and I know they've got 2 or 3 action items that they need to bring before the board for its full attention.
We have 2 requests for extensions, and then a request to count preparation and passing of a particular professional exam as CPE credit. So, first request for extension.
While we're pulling that up, Pam, I neglected to make a kind of one backgrounder here. For those that are watching the meeting, the board meets in public session on the day before our board meeting. So we met yesterday afternoon to fully and thoroughly consider and vet the decision items that the board will be making. So we have a committee structure that vets those. All board members are entitled to listen and participate in those committee deliberations, but the committee will make recommendations regarding its action items to the full board. And so there have literally been hours of thought and discussion on the combined items that we are discussing this morning from the licensing committees as well as the other committees that we'll get to a little bit later on. So with that, Pam, pardon that interruption, but I'll turn it back to you.
And our first letter is from Caitlin Cantrell, who asked for an extension of FAR credit, which expired June the 21st. This candidate tested positive for COVID on January 5th, 2022, and ended up taking leave at that time. His acknowledged medical backgrounds, but we do know that COVID long-term effect, and then person was supposed to take it, had failed a May 16th attempt, and then had rescheduled June 20th. And although she ended up taking it, she was diagnosed with vertigo just days before then, and so had to get a ride to take. Was not. So she's asking for an extension to have a chance to pass this, to pass reg without the medical situation having a negative effect. So we acknowledge that she describes other items in here, such as a heavy work schedule, and etc. However, the board, just unless there's something else going on, we really cannot judge that. we are focusing only on what we consider extenuating circumstance, COVID diagnosis, and then more specific, appropriate request, and it do move to grant an extension. And help me out here. What was the date that we said?
I think to October 31st is what I
it was
have.
the end of October.
Yes.
All right, so we are moving that we grant an extension of FAR to October 31st, 2022.
Thank you, Pam. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Andy. Is there any further discussion? If not, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner. Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gay Moon. Rob Vance.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby. Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. Pam?
Our second letter is from Crystal Moore, who asks for a 3-month extension on regulation to give time to pass her 4th part of BEC. Again, she offers a full description of what she was experiencing as far as pressures and situations that in her mind affected her ability to test successfully. The board only considers the things that we see as extenuating. That should not be taken as any indication that we're not sympathetic toward the complexity of factors that we're weighing on this candidate. But specifically for us, she reporting having had COVID twice. The first time was on April 9th, 2021, and she does have documentation for that. The second one was a home test on November 2021. And so she has, in fact, taken several parts since April of 2021, 8 parts, I believe, and 5 since the. So certainly she has applying herself, but there again, we have we cannot make an assessment really of specific impact that COVID might have had or for how long. However, this person, we think, makes a reasonable request for her situation. We don't want to be overly lenient because it has been some time since the latest COVID situation. We are not considering her argument that she had difficulty scheduling. No idea, again, to what extent, what specifics she faced. However, she was able to schedule 8 different parts. And so in our view, the testing centers were pretty much back up to normal by the time she was passing. It should be noted that she did retake this last part again. Date was July the 12th. And so the board would like to extend her, instead of a 3-month extension on regulation, we would like to extend for
July 12th, 2022.
so the taken
That same day.
and was taken July 12th, 2022. I'm sorry. I got confused there. And so we are extending just through there with the reasoning that if she is able to count her past credits, that she will in fact be finished with the exam. And so we would like to move an extension to July the 12th.
Thank you, Pam. So just to clarify, we're extending the reg credit to July 12, 2022, and I think we have a motion from Pam. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a second from John. Is there any further comment or discussion? Hearing none. Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously. And Pam, I think there's one other action item to report out from your committee.
But this is a request to count the Certified Treasury Professional Exam for CPE credit. The board does grant credit for similar professional exams. The relevant rules state CPE credit may be allowed for the successful completion of exams for Certified Management Accountant, Certified Information Systems Auditor, as well as other similar exams approved by the board. Credit will be awarded at a rate of 5 times the length of each exam taken and limited to 50% of the total CPE required under Rule. So, basic exams. Note that qualifications for sitting include experience and education requirements. The education requirements vary based on, the experience requirement varies based on the education. So they sort of trade off essentially, but it's obvious that this is a professional exam in the areas of finance and accounting. So we do move that this be allowed to count for CP.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Is there a second to the motion to allow the
Second.
credit? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Not. Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church, David Crenshaw,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby, Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. And Pam, are there any additional items from the licensing committee?
No, that's all we have.
Okay, thank you, and also thanks to the committee members. And as indicated, there was extensive deliberation on each of these cases by the committee, as well as with input from the full board yesterday at our public committee meetings. What I would propose to the board is that we go ahead and go through the enforcement committee report and then take a 10-minute break or so. Greg Gilbert is the chair of our enforcement committee, but he is at a medical appointment and or in transit this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and walk us through the synopsis of the committee's activities from yesterday, and then we'll take the appropriate action as we have it. Earlier today, I think the board members were sent an email, and also we now have a hard copy of the so-called red line version of the legal report that reflects the changes that were made as a result of the committee's deliberations and the extensive deliberations that the committee undertook yesterday on the cases. And so I'm going to flag those in particular, but I'm not going to go back into each of the cases in as much detail as we went through this yesterday in the committee meeting. So just to flag those, if you're looking at the synopsis of the cases, there are additions to the recommendations or modifications to the recommendations for cases 8, 9, 10, and 13. And so I'll make sure that we have time to kind of look at those and make sure that's consistent with the sense of the board from its deliberations yesterday. And what I propose that we do is we take the consent agenda cases 1 through 6, vote on them as a group, and then we'll deal with case 7 where we have a board member that will need to recuse. And then I'd like to deal also with a separate vote on case 8 because we had modified the recommendation initially from as a result of yesterday's deliberation. So with respect to cases 1 through 6 on the consent agenda, essentially these are cases that are either being recommended for closure, for example, because they don't fall within the board's jurisdiction, such as a fee dispute, or the respondent not being a licensee, or generally closing with a letter of instruction or closing with a letter of warning here. And so with respect to cases 1 through 6, I would move that the board approve the committee's recommendations from its deliberations yesterday. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on cases 1 through 6. Are there any other comments or questions? If not, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Shaw.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Lynn Monroe.
Aye.
A. Moon.
Aye.
Bob Vance.
Aye.
Weatherby. Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Thank you. So the recommendations are approved for cases 1 through 6.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Just for the record, I would like to go ahead and read the case numbers for 1 through 6.
Please do. Thank you.
Number 1 is 2022009391. Case number 2 is 2022018851. Case number 3 is 2022003851. Case number 4 is 2022005121. Case number 5 is 2022016121. And case number 6 is 2022007171.
Thank you for reading that into the record. I appreciate that. We'll now proceed to consideration of case number 7, which is number 2022009281. This is a tax services related case. It is on the consent agenda item, but the reason that we're voting on it separately is because we have one board member that needs to recuse from that vote. I would move that the board accept the committee's recommendation on case number 7.
I'll second
We have
that.
a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously. Now we'll proceed to case number 8, which is case number 2022004031. This involves a potentially unlicensed activity type of case, and in particular it involves situations involving credit unions and procedures that were performed by entities on credit unions that resulted in reports that appear similar to but do not mention specific AICPA standards with respect to agreed upon procedures or other attest level reports. The board had a very thorough discussion on the elements of that case yesterday afternoon, or the committee did, and I'll highlight the change in the recommendation from the original recommendation to the current committee recommendation that was approved by the committee yesterday. The committee recommended essentially changing the original recommendation from issue or authorize a letter of warning, reminding the licensee that in accordance with the appropriate statutes, they may not use language in any statement relating to the financial affairs of a person or entity that is conventionally used by licensees in reports on financial statements and in accordance with Rule 0020-04-.06 parent 2 to that of issuing a letter of instruction, which is a slightly lower level of potential discipline regarding those same fact patterns. It was acknowledged that there is some ambiguity and perhaps even some conflict between the requirements that credit unions are statutorily authorized to participate in regarding so-called board audits, if you will, of certain matters with respect to credit unions. And as a profession, we don't particularly like that term, but those are statutory requirements that we're not going to be able to change here. So the upshot is, for this one, we moved from a recommendation of letter of warning to a letter of instruction. And so I would move that the board accept the committee's recommendation from yesterday afternoon about issuing a letter of instruction in this particular case. Is there a second?
Second it.
We have a second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this case? Hearing none. Karen, will you call the roll?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church. Shaw.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Aye.
Vance.
Aye.
Weatherby.
Aye.
Elmore.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously. Now we're moving into the block of cases where there is proposed discipline that would be required, and typically that means potential for civil penalty or other disciplinary measures. We'll start with case 9, and I'll pull this out because it has a new recommendation as a result of the deliberations yesterday afternoon. The case involves potential unlicensed activity and holding out as a CPA on a suspended license. The original recommendation would have authorized a letter of warning and cease and desist language requiring respondent to cease completing CPA services and to remove the CPA designation on all things pertaining to their business within 30 days of receiving the letter. However, if respondent does not comply within the required time limit, authorize a formal hearing with an authority to settle via a consent order assessing a $10,000 penalty. And I don't know if I read the case number, but it is 2022013651. As a result of extensive deliberations in committee yesterday, the revised committee recommendation is to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via a consent order with cease and desist language requiring respondent to cease CPA services immediately, as well as requiring the respondent to remove the CPA designation on all effects pertaining to their business within 30 days, additionally authorizing assessing a $10,000 civil penalty. So that is the committee recommendation. I will move that committee recommendation. Is there a second?
Second it.
We have a second. Is there any further comment or discussion on this one? If not, Karen, will you call the roll?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe. Gay Moon.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
She stepped out.
I'm so sorry. Mary Elmore.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes and the committee recommendation is adopted. We'll proceed to case number 10, which is number 20220155541. This involves failure to comply with peer review requirements. I'm calling this out separately because the committee changed the recommendation as a result of its deliberations from yesterday. So the case involves a notification of a respondent being dropped from peer review and continuing to operate without a current permit. The original recommendation called for a letter of caution requiring respondent to submit an accepted peer review by December 31, 2022. However, if the peer review is not submitted by the aforementioned required date, authorizing a formal hearing with the authority to settle via a consent order assessing a $3,500 civil penalty along with the submission of an accepted peer review. The committee's deliberations around this one were kind of attempting to have a recommendation that was more consistent with past precedent on peer review cases. And so the committee recommendation to the board is to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via a consent order, assessing a $3,000 civil penalty and requiring respondent to to submit an accepted peer review by December 31, 2022. So I'll move the committee recommendation on this one. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Is there any further discussion on this case? Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church, David Crenshaw,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. The next two cases, 11 and 12, and I'll read their case numbers. 11 is 2022-009-231. Case 12 is 2022-009-261. And also case 14, which is case number 2022-01-3641, after committee deliberation had no changes to the previously authorized recommendations. So with the board's permission, I would move that we accept the recommendations for cases 11, 12, and 14, and then we'll deal with 13 separately because it had a modified recommendation. So we have a motion to approve the recommendations for 11, 12, and 14. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Is there any further discussion on those three cases? If not, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
That motion passes with respect to the recommendations on cases 11, 12, and 14. The last case in the proposed disciplinary section is case number 13, which is specifically number 2022012441. This case involves also failure to comply with the peer review requirements, but with certain mitigating factors regarding the fact that the firm has not performed a test work over the last 4 years. As a result of the committee deliberations from yesterday, there was a change in the recommendation to read as follows. So the committee recommendation that is being recommended to the board for approval is authorizing a formal hearing with the authority to settle via a consent order requiring respondent to cease performing a test work. Additionally, requiring respondent to close their firm permit within 30 days. If respondent does not comply, authorize a $1,000 civil penalty. I will put that forward as a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or comment on this case? If not, Karen, will you call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously. The last two cases, numbers 15 and 16. In 15, the detailed number is 2022-006941. And number 16, which is case number 2021-072641, are what we call representations. In essence, these are cases where the board has made a previous consideration of them, but new data subsequent to those deliberations or decisions has come to light. For example, we may have placed a case in litigation monitoring because we're awaiting the outcome of underlying litigation, and now we have new information that might reflect that application. That is the case with respect to case number 15, where the board voted to place that complaint in litigation monitoring, and as it turned out, criminal charges against the respondent were dismissed and an order of expungement was received. And so the new recommendation on case number 15 is to close it. And with respect to case number 16, which was an unlicensed activity peer review violation case, new information was received with respect to that case, where the respondent voluntarily informed the board that they had additionally worked on 2 additional audits during a time when they did not have an appropriate permit or firm permit. It had been in expired status. And so they voluntarily came to the board, and the original recommendation was to deploy a civil penalty of $3,000. As a result of the new information, the committee is recommending an additional $1,000 civil penalty for providing attest services without a firm permit, and that would be added to the respondent's previously authorized $3,000 civil penalty for providing services without a firm permit. We felt that this was an appropriate item. Oftentimes we would use a $3,000 penalty, but in this case that had already been employed, and the firm voluntarily reported the additional instances of noncompliance to the state board. And so with that, I would ask for a motion to accept the new recommendations for each of the 2 representation cases. And I would ask if there's a second to that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
have to recuse myself from number 15.
Okay, then we will, thank you for letting me know that. If I may, before the second is logged, we will deal with them separately in separate votes. And so I'll move that the new recommendation for case number 15 be accepted by the board. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second. So on case number 15, is there any further discussion? If not, will you please call the roll, Karen?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby, Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries. And now we'll deal with the final case, number 16. And the motion would be to accept the new recommendation with respect to that case. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second. Thank you, Andy. Is there any further comment or discussion on that case? Okay, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Weatherby,
Aye.
Elmore,
Aye.
That motion passes. And I believe that concludes the action items from the Enforcement Committee, and would just like to thank Greg, the members of the Enforcement Committee, and the investigative and legal staff for their work in preparation for this and in responding to the board's many questions regarding some of these disciplinary cases. What I would propose that we do is, I'm showing just about 9:50, that we take a 10-minute break till 10 a.m. Central Time. And I would just ask for those that are participating online that they keep their connections open but muted so that we don't have any problems reestablishing when we reconvene at 10 a.m. We're in recess for 10 minutes. Make sure that we have Janet and Larry on the line, and to see if Greg has also been able to join us at this point. Janet, are you
This
with
is
us?
Janet. I'm here.
Great. And Larry? Larry, if you're muted, we can't hear you.
I'm here.
I'm glad you're still with us here. And Greg, have you joined us yet this morning? Doesn't look like it. Okay. I think we have everybody else here. So the next committee report is our Law and Rules Committee, and I'll turn that over to Chairman of that committee, Andy Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We met yesterday and just kind of went through some things. We don't really have anything to bring before the board today, but just as an update, there are a couple of items that we are considering in the future to change and maybe bring back to this board in October. And I'm going to kind of throw it over to Wendy, and she did a great job of explaining that yesterday and the items that are there. And so our executive director, Wendy.
Right, thank you, Andy. We are looking at a couple of different things. The first one related to CPA evolution and looking at modifying the way we measure the 18 months by which you need to complete all 4 sections of the exam, and specifically when that date starts. So it currently starts on the day you sit for the exam, but we are looking at potentially changing that to the day you receive your score. And that would give candidates a longer period of time to really effectively be able to plan their schedule to sit for the various sections, and not have score delays count against them too badly. So we expect when CPA evolution hits in January 24 that there will be some score holds, which could delay scores by 2 or 3 months. You know, we don't know at this point, but giving folks a chance to not start that 18 months until they actually receive the score would be helpful in that situation. So that's the first item. The second item is looking at the peer review section. It is very outdated, still refers to the board having their own peer review program. So updating that and making sure we're in line with model rules and what's going on across the country so that we can effectively enforce that area of the rules. And lastly, we had a brief discussion about the principal place of business as actually stated in our law. And so there are a lot of talks nationally about this section of the law, and that it is interpreted in a variety of different ways, which makes enforcement and regulatory actions difficult. And right now, the law indicates that the licensee determines their principal place of business, which I think is acceptable. The issue is, can that change from week to week? Does it need to be reported? Does it need to be clarified through definition? Those types of things. So it is being looked at nationally, so we are keeping an eye on that, on whether we would want to incorporate any changes in the state of Tennessee. And so I think those are the items we talked about yesterday.
And Mr. Chairman, we have one more item that we kind of discussed, but we found out that it would not require a rule change. And our executive director is going to bring that up under CPA evolution with a transition recommendation. So that being all from our committee.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate that. The last committee report is the executive committee, and there are actually there is one action item that the committee voted out yesterday for board consideration and approval. And then we also reviewed the board's interim financial statement progress to date, as well as travel expenses, itemized travel expenses report to date. With respect to the action item, that relates to a mutual recognition agreement regarding the CPA and Ireland, the CPA exam or credential and Ireland. While many of us were attending the Nasba Eastern Regional meeting, Ken Bishop, the executive director of Nasba, announced the agreement that had been settled between the appropriate parties here in the U.S. and in Ireland with respect to a mutual recognition agreement providing a qualification pathway for accounting professionals in the U.S. and Ireland to practice in the partner countries. Typically, the board has consistently approved established MRAs that have been executed by the International Qualifications Appraisal Board of the Nasba and AICPA. And so the recommendation for board consideration today is to accept the recommendation from the International Qualifications Appraisal Board that we would accept, I guess the way I would put it, the MRA is executed by that board. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further comment or discussion? If not, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby. Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Larry Elmore. 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 Larry Elm
Thank you. That motion carries. The next items are just a synopsis of the financial report, and for that, Wendy, if there are any items for the interim financial report that you'd like to highlight or any other items operationally, that would be welcome.
I think I'll just cover the revenue and expenses, so we have that on the record, and have anybody ask questions. We are nearing the end of our fiscal year, so these numbers that I'm going to read out are as of May 22, and our fiscal year end is June 30, 2022, so we have 1 month left. Currently, our net revenues are at $950,360, with regular expenses at $637,138, and cost backs at $150,719, bringing total expenditures at $787,857, which leaves us on the plus side at $162,503. We run somewhere between $60,000 and $70,000 in expenses per month, so we're going to be somewhere around $100,000 that we'll put into reserves. Some items not noted, our regional travel in June is not noted, so we hope to be able to apply that back to this fiscal year, so we will see that in there. Going forward, obviously we will see more travel, which we have not seen in the prior fiscal year. So I think there's always concern when we're putting a lot of money into reserves, right? And whether we want to continue to do that or if there's adjustments we need to make. And I think we kind of continue to keep an eye on that, but taking into account maybe the things that we need to anticipate. So I did mention yesterday that the state authorized raises across the board July 1, so we will see those increases coming through. So that's an expenditure we'll have to keep an eye on. Travel will go back to more normal levels. The other last item to note is our cost backs are significantly lower, noticeably lower than the prior several years. And so I do have somebody kind of looking into that. Staffing at the Assistant Commissioner's office they are lacking a couple of positions, so there's some monies there. But looking into other reasons for why that amount is less than normal and trying to get some feedback there. Our legal costs have been less. When Maria took over as our sole attorney and was more experienced, our cost in that area went down. We may see, as a transition to a new attorney, we may see that bump up a little bit, but I don't expect any crazy numbers like we saw at one point in legal costs. So we're doing well there. From an IT standpoint, we do see that's probably our biggest increase area where we see specifics related to our board coming through from an IT perspective. So that, I believe, covers an overview of the financials.
Thank you, Wendy. Any comments or questions from board members with respect to that report? I think that concludes the executive committee and therefore all of our board committee report outs. The next topic on the agenda is the CPA evolution discussion. I think, Andy, this is what you were alluding to, where we may have a transition recommendation coming, and the board did, or there were some discussions in connection with CPA evolution yesterday about what some transition concessions might need to be made here as we move to a revamped version of the exam under what's called CPA evolution. And Wendy, I'll turn that over to you if you have any comments or overviews that you'd like to make with respect to that and the potential action item that you would ask the board to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, Andy did go over this a little bit yesterday, so I will try to summarize here. But as we enter CPA evolution and a new exam starting January 1st of 2024, we do expect a lot of transition. BEC will go away. We'll have some new discipline sections. We will have some score release delays. And so there will be concerns by candidates, as you might imagine. And so those individuals on the CBT admin committee, Pam is one of those, and the executive directors committee of Nasba have discussed what a extension might look like for folks that have credit on a section. to give them a little bit of peace of mind as we enter a very significant change in the CPA exam. So the recommendation from these two groups is that any candidate with credit on January 1, 2024, which is the same date the new exam starts, will have such credit extended by 18 months to June 30, 2025. Now, the board is authorized through rule to approve exam extensions for credible reasons. And so that's your authority to do that. And in this case, we would be doing what we would call more of a blanket extension to anyone that has credit on one or more parts on that date. And so that would basically give them an entire extra 18 months. For some candidates, you know, it depends on when you took that exam and when that score is going to expire. After the exam starts, we will likely see some score holds and those types of things. So we will have candidates affected along the way as well, but that is going to be addressed at a later date. So this is a kind of for the people that have credit as the new exam starts. And that is the recommendation today to the board, is to approve that application to anyone that has credit on January 1.
Thank you, Wendy. Is there a motion to that effect?
I make the motion.
Andy moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, David. Is there any further discussion on that motion, which would be to allow for a blanket extension of CPA examination credits that are in unexpired status as of January 1, 2024, to be extended to June 30, 2025, or an 18-month extension? Any further comment or discussion?
I just have one question. Have any other states?
I think Andy can help us with that.
There are 6 states that had already had approved and given their notice to Nasba as of last Friday. There were 2 states that had approved that had not given notice. And then there's several other, as our board is today, there's several other boards that are meeting. They're hoping to have this done across all the boards and have it completed by September. And everybody seems to be on that timeline.
Thank you. Perfect.
Kevin, I might say a couple of things
Yes.
because I've been on groups that discuss this, and it sounds like everyone's in agreement, so I sort of hate to give pros and cons, but I think we need to know what we're approving here. So Wendy and I talked somewhat about it, and the need for this, I think, is very understandable, because if you have to go into this, you know, you've been under the old test system, you have to go into the new, you might actually have to take more coursework. Not that it's required, but just more coursework to understand some of the topics that will now be included. Data will be more of a factor in all parts, for example. And, you know, you know, under various scenarios, if you ended up taking one of the new discipline parts, that certainly might require more coursework. That might not be the norm, but just you might need to at least acquire new knowledge. So it's not just a matter of, oh, okay, I lost that part, now I sign up for another. You've got to study what the new part is and prepare appropriately for it. So it's very understandable. And so there was just a lot of thought put into this to say, you know, we need to be compassionate toward the candidates. On the other hand, we are going to get petitions, because what if somebody lost their parts in December, and so they don't have it in January, and they didn't get that nice extra 18 months? And what if somebody takes it in February of 2024, they're only going to get 18 months, they're not going to get this extra. So somebody might, you know, by luck or design, have a lot of months between, you know, in their retention. But it's a cost benefit thing, and that's just sort of the way it is. So I think regardless of how we go, we're going to have a lot of petitions. And we've been through this before with some other changes that weren't this drastic. But that's the situation. I just wanted to make sure the significance of this is not lost, because it's a big move, but after much discussion, that is what was recommended, and I can certainly.
Appreciate those admonitions, and particularly when we think of blanket credit extension, we think that solves all the problems, or some may think that. And you're
Like
correctly
COVID,
pointing
right?
out that it will definitely not do that. It will perhaps solve some, or at least provide peace of
Create
mind to
others
some.
in some people's minds,
Yes.
right? Yes.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So if someone passed a part today, July 26th, it would expire January 26th to 24. They could have almost 3 years.
Correct.
Okay.
Likewise, if you pass in December 2023, then you're really only going to get an extra month. So there's some interesting, that's why I feel like we're going to get petitions as well, because although you're saying you're giving 18 months, not everybody actually receives an 18 months, extension.
Which was true for COVID blanket extensions.
But I think that's why we had some trouble with COVID.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree, and I am also sort of afraid of this. But I will say one reasoning would be the person who passes it today has really not been. In fact, the rules for the new test have not even been determined, and so that person is operating under an ongoing system. The person who passes it December 2023 is very aware of what that person's up against, the schools that person attended and was affiliated with would have prepared that person for the changes, so that person's more prepared. But at the extreme, it's a big extension. It really is.
Thank you. So I believe we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church, David Crenshaw,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Heather Monroe,
Aye.
Aye.
Bob Vance,
Aye.
Weatherby,
Aye.
Elmore,
Aye.
Thank you, Larry. The motion passes. I think the other item under CPA evolution might be some discussion or regarding the exposure draft that's out there with respect, I gather, to the exam blueprint. And so, Wendy, any commentary there that you'd like to share?
Yes. So the AICPA is soliciting feedback through an exposure draft of the new design to the exam. So as a part of CPA evolution and the changes in the sections of the CPA exam, there will be a lot of changes. And they have gone through a process in the past couple of years of a practice analysis, which is a research study that they go through systematically to determine what is the content that is needed on the exam, what makes it relevant in today's market. They have focus groups, they have confirmation panels, they go through a number of different levels of research and approval to develop what the content and then the exam blueprints are going to look like. So the exam blueprints are kind of an outline of the content that you'll find on the exam, as well as a breakdown of how much will be covered in various areas on the exam, what the candidate can look forward to. Pam and I've had a discussion on how much the candidates might actually use the blueprints. I think we're not real sure. We know educators use those blueprints. I think the blueprints are intended to be used by the candidates, but they probably go more towards the exam.
The higher level at planning, I
Right.
think, on the parts of schools
Yeah.
and
This,
CPA review companies, et cetera. But some will certainly use those blueprints.
Right. So this exposure draft is the culmination of the research project, and within it includes the revised blueprints as will determine the new exam. And so the exposure draft is asking for comment on the exam blueprints and whether they've hit the mark. Are they including the right content at the right levels? And so they're asking various parties, any parties that would like, to comment on what we believe about that. It is very specific. And in my mind, I can't determine whether the correct content is there or not. You all may. I know Pam's looked at it probably more than everyone else, but maybe not to the extent to be able to comment. So what's before you today is, do you wish as a board to comment, to discuss on this exposure draft? The plan is for Nasba to do a general response to be released sometime in August, maybe early September. The deadline is September 30. Their goal is to get it out in advance of the deadline so that if boards wish to review and piggyback on that, they're welcome to. We don't have to respond at all. It's just a decision that the board, and maybe Pam can add some additional information and thoughts regarding the exposure draft.
Remember that there was a model curriculum distributed for schools to use, and then some revisions were made to that as well. So we have received a lot of information, very extensive information. I did go back and read after our conversation. It gets down to what will be asked, or not what will be asked, but the specific topics that will be asked. There is necessarily a lot of uncertainty here, because there will be the first time, a second, and a third to administering this test, and until that's been done and some questions have been released to the CPA review people, textbooks have been written, etc. You can know what it says it's going to test, but if you haven't seen some questions and practiced in classes and CPA reviews, etc., it's just hard to know exactly what they mean. So if I told you you would have to prepare a cash flow statement, well, I can tell you I could ask you to do that on many different levels and with many different complexities. And so how much time do you spend studying that, and are you going to have bad debts or not? I mean, there are just so many specifics. Now, I used to really resist even referring to CPA review companies in advising students, because I felt like that was their personal choice if they wanted to take a CPA review course, and some did and some didn't. That's a profit-making entity, etc. But over the years, as the exams become more complex and the process of taking the exam has become an important consideration as well, not only have the students relied on CPA review companies, but the profession has relied on CPA review companies. And so really the AICPA and Nasba have relationships with CPA review companies, because they do release questions to the public, and the CPA review companies pick this up. But I meant to look it up. I don't know what the percentage of students are that take a review course, but a lot of people look to those companies, and a lot of professors look to those companies. So the representatives call on the schools. They offer their software free for instruction. For example, you can give questions off of their software, which are former questions of the CPA exam. So over the years, I've certainly begun relying on them more to say, what does this change mean, and what are you telling students to learn, et cetera, et cetera. So with these changes, Wendy and I discussed, so how is the profession going to deal with this? And she reached out to Mike Decker with AICPA, and I reached out to the Becker people, whom I know, and the ones asked, what is the process that you go through, and how will this affect it? And they both described a process where the AICPA meets with representatives from Becker. They do discuss changes, etc. And they also said, and Becker also said, there will very definitely be a gap. There's going to be a gap. So understanding specifically what's going to be tested and how on this exam is just virtually impossible right now. So with that said, as far as the exposure draft and the topics, I was hoping that they were going to remove some more topics. I just think, if you remember, started down this or down some in the numbers as far as people taking the exam, and the thought was we need to be more relevant. So this whole process has been an attempt to become more relevant. And the thinking was that we would add data across the board and maybe take off some things relevant. And so they did this huge study of there's some acronym for it, but the newly licensed CPAs, I think that's it. What do they really do? Not the ones who've been out 10 years, but the new ones, and that's what people need to know. But there's so many different areas and firms and companies. And so they tried to take off, for example, some governmental, and people yelled about it, said, no, that's my area, put it back on. And so I just don't see that when you look at the list of what they took off, they're really, really clearly defined, very, in some cases, minor parts. So anyway, it looks like there's just so much on there right now, but it will be adjusted down. So as far as should we respond, all I can say personally is this is the end of years of study and research. And I can't argue with the process, and the profession did what the profession said it was going to do. So I think it just remains to be seen. So I personally am not willing to go through line by line and say, oh, take this out, put this in. I just think they've done the huge analysis. I just don't think we can. Wendy and I discussed, do you want to say something like, we understand and support the process and know there'll be uncertainties, but at this point, we think this is appropriate, or say nothing. Anyway, those are the only conclusions I would come to at this point.
Thank you, Pam. Any other board members with preferences or thoughts as to whether we should opine in one way, shape, or form or another, or not?
I've just got a quick update, but I agree with Dr. Church that I think that going through the process and taking the time to go through it, that they put a lot of research and several committees have worked on it, and that for years, and that I think that at this point that I wouldn't recommend that I don't have any issues with what they put together. I do think that you do, that they're going to come down and kind of change some of them at the end because it probably is too much. As far as they haven't taken enough categories out yet or reduced them. But with that said, the CP Evolution is meeting this week to kind of go back through that again. And so we got an update last week on that. But one of the questions I wanted to ask Pamela, Dr. Church, is that we got an update last week that kind of said that the universities were not really talking about the model curriculum anymore. It looks like they've all kind of focused on it, and that they're going back and they're focusing on the changes that need to be made. So it was almost like our university and colleges had said, okay, we know where we want to go. Now let's start looking at the text. And just see your thoughts on that.
I think we are pretty far down the road. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of pushback from the universities. Wendy and I have discussed that it will be interesting to see how many schools decide to focus on all the parts and how many of them only focus, for example, on one discipline, probably. But I think your statement is accurate that they are now in the process of determining how they're going to do it. I think there's concern about how to do it because it's difficult to hire professors right now. I know of two personally that offers to two. Most people accepted. Different people goes back down. Market is just. So I think there's a lot of fear as to how, maybe fear is too strong a word, but uncertain. But I was interested to read some of the topics. For example, in the discipline, a lot of it was concepts more than cranking out data. And so things like that are going to determine to what extent schools have to teach more technical things. That's an example of, I don't know that schools really have all the facts yet, but on the other hand, I think they're just preparing. I think they're just preparing as far as how each school plans to approach it.
Thank you, Pam and Andy.
I have a comment.
John?
I think we should defer to NASBA's process here and their response. They're going to, as you and I both sit on the same response committee. We've already been told we'll be looking at that, and I want to say there's one or two committees of NASBA that will be crafting a response, and then our role will be to review that before signature. And so, you know, I'm not sure it's behooves 50 or more regulatory bodies to do that all operate under the, you know, auspices of NASBA in conjunction with them. So it would seem to make sense to look to them for their response process.
John, any other comments? I think I would share that view, and so unless there's objection, I would say we probably, as a separate board, would not in reply with a formal comment.
So let me ask this question regarding John's comment. If we receive NASBA's response, would you all like to review and then determine whether we want to support that response in an official letter, or are you saying just let their response stand and go with that?
Yeah, I think the way that would work, and John and I both serve on the Regulatory Response Committee, and so you'll have two board members that have insight into what NASBA is doing and some input into what the response would be from NASBA. To me, that sounds sufficient. I think NASBA's, you know, as an organization, is not going to be, I think, far out in left field. I think they're going to play it pretty conservatively up the middle in their response, and I think that ought to be sufficient.
Well, and NASBA has been part of this every step of the way. It's not like they're just getting it and then they're responding. They help develop it.
Right. That's a good point. Okay. All right. Any other items under CPA evolution?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Next item on our agenda is NASBA updates. I'm very proud to indicate that we currently have two of our members that are sitting on the full board of NASBA. We have Larry Elmore representing the Southeast region, and then since our last meeting, Andy Bonner has learned that he has been appointed as a member of the board.
Greg Gilbert.
And we have Greg Gilbert joining in. Greg, welcome.
Is now joining.
Thank you, Kevin.
And so what I would request we do is just to turn things over to Larry first and then Andy for NASBA board updates if they have anything that they would like to report out. Larry?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to Andy not only for clarity as far as voice communication, but also to avoid us repeating each other. So I'll turn it over to Andy, let him handle that.
All righty. Thank you, Larry. Andy?
Okay, thanks, Larry. And just as a note to Larry, just jump in here if you have additional comments on anything that we cover, because Larry's been very involved with the board and is very knowledgeable. And, you know, it just being from the great state of Tennessee and being on this board, and also being on the board of Nasba, who is located here in Nashville, it just is it's an honor to be a part of that. And I would tell you that as Nashville goes and as the state goes, we get a lot of people from around the world who come to Nashville to meet at the Nasba offices, and they thoroughly enjoy it here. I mean, they come in, just to give you, we got 2 such organizations here that we got updates on in our board meeting last week. The International Ethics Committee is making its 3rd visit to Nashville. They enjoy it so much that they want to come down here and put their cowboy hats on and their boots and go to meetings and then go downtown. To quote them, they said that they just love Nashville and they love coming here, and they appreciate NASBA having the facilities on one of their floors for all of them to meet, and then also to have virtual meetings. And if you haven't been over there, it's a first-class meeting area. NASBA has since gotten rid of their location in New York, and so we have 2 floors over there. That one of them is for the NASBA employees and the executive offices and where the operations are. The other one is basically just a meeting room, and all kind of organizations come over there. They're great ambassadors for our state and for our profession, and we have them right across the street over here. It's kind of neat to say. The other one that's coming in the month of August, that one will be in September of this year. The CPE Summit will take place. It'll be August the 20th and 21st in Nashville. And they'll have sponsors there also. It's a 2022 National Registry Summit. And so they had put that off because of COVID. But now they'll be back in Nashville. It will be at the Lowe's Vanderbilt Hotel. And so they will be using that. So that's kind of exciting to say that we're from Tennessee. We're supporting a company that's in Nashville and in the state of Tennessee and doing a lot for this board. And it's also comforting to know that we have so many people on this board that are involved with committees. And, that we have 2 directors, and it's something that, the previous board members for us encouraged us to get involved and to participate, and it's really neat to see that this board is participating and going and being a part of it. We got an update on STEM, which is we talked about for years. The NASBA board was told that they were very encouraged at what's going on in Washington, and that possibly accounting has a potential to be a part of that now. So there's more to come on that, and so we're kind of hoping about that. I talked about this morning when Judy made a comment about the annual meeting and do you have to have your shots? And so we kind of went through that. It says here that, we went through the process of the change of the rule that we just approved and the need to get that kind of done. NASBA has been asking candidates, we've all kind of seen a reduction in pipeline. And so the AICPA and NASBA have very much focused on why are people not sit for the exam once but don't finish. And so they've been asking candidates who have been sitting for the CPA exam why they don't show up for a scheduled appointment. And, they're getting responses like forgot ID, forgot notice of schedule, have a different job right now, and I couldn't take time off to go sit for the exam. Something came up, and almost no responses were I had to pay, the fees went up, or regret that they lost that money because they couldn't sit for it. But all of them were like, hey, I just had something come up in life, and 92% of them indicated that they were going to be coming back and taking the exam. And so that was encouraging. And so NASBA and the AICPA have really been doing a great job of meeting and have summits through the year and talk about the issues. And I can tell you right now, pipeline is one of them, and professors is another. That they're very much talking about that. They're trying to get their hands around it. NASBA is actually going through and changing some of the way that their programs operate so they can get more information. Even so far as sending out kind of like a doctor or a dentist would do, send out a reminder notice, hey, your exam's coming up. And so they're trying to do, a lot more detail and taking some deep dives into the information that they have to help look at the different ways that we can have a success story out of that and get the pipeline back up. The gateway, I said yesterday 2.0, but it's really 3.0. Is on schedule and in budget, and so that's encouraging. We did learn a little bit at the annual meeting about this subject, and we were updated last Thursday and Friday at the meeting, and I specifically got up afterwards to ask Ken Bishop if we could share this with our board. He said, yes, please do. And the news had that EY was fined $100 million with a settlement and settled with the SEC for their staff that were cheating on ethics exams. NASBA actually, on behalf of all the boards, kind of called EY and said, hey, we probably need to meet because several boards were asking them questions. And so EY came and met with NASBA. NASBA quickly informed them that they're not the enforcers and that EY should pass the information along to NASBA so that NASBA then could look at the issues and then send the information to each one of the boards. Or they could go visit all 50 individually. I think they got the message that they would like to send that information to NASBA. This was, they had 30 days. This just happened in the middle of July. So we very much think that we will have a list of people who may have been involved in it, and that they will be in touch with the Tennessee staff, and so thus from there that this board will be informed about it, issues and if we had any licensees that were in the state. And so I think that, you look at something like that and you look at these young people starting out in their career, and I do know that they've already implemented that those people who sat for that exam and possibly, took the test, that maybe one of the things is for them to go back and take it again. So I think there's really a lot of people who've gotten caught in that program that probably were, it was pretty much a peer pressure thing. And so we'll have the opportunity to discuss that and to look at that.
Wasn't that the exam that's given once you pass the parts of the CPA exam? So as I understand it, it's an open book exam?
Right.
Because in hearing what the general public said, like I talked to all the general public, but comments, they said, well, this was over ethics, and I'm thinking, well, it's over some real specific rules, really. It's not just what would you do, but it was an open book test. So I'm not saying that makes it better or worse. It's just crazy. But, it just seems like that was such a risk to take in a test. What's the pass rate of that test, Wendy, in Tennessee?
I don't think we know, but I mean, everybody it doesn't
passes
stop
it.
someone from becoming licensed.
Everybody passes it.
Yeah.
So cost-benefit analysis should have said, just take the test. And so I think it was very much a cultural thing, and I would be willing to bet that that's not the only firm that's doing this. I bet it's extremely common, perhaps. I mean, it's an open book test. Not that any of my students would ever cheat on an open book test, but it's easier to cheat, and also it just, I don't think they perceived it as a big deal, perhaps. So anyway, it's just an interesting phenomenon, and I don't think that the newspaper articles really described the true situation, just in understanding. Anyway, it was very, very disappointing.
Andy, what did they allegedly do to perpetrate this?
Well, allegedly what was happening was that the answers to the open book test were sent out via email. And they went so far as to look at all the email accounts, who got them, who opened them, who printed them, who didn't print them, who deleted them. I mean, it's going to be very specific, is my understanding.
Did the firm itself retain this, and was this something coming from the firm, or just individuals who had shared this information?
That I don't know. We'll just have to wait to see. I mean, I've heard rumors about what thoughts were, but we're just going to have to wait to see the facts.
Andy, just to chime in on what Pam's saying, I can say as a former Ernst & Young auditor that even continuing education affects your utilization rate and what you're actually getting paid for by the firm. So while it does not excuse their actions at all, these young professionals are under an immense amount of stress.
That's, I think, several, things I've heard at the Nasba meeting were that it's very easy to understand that as a newbie on staff and what those young people are going through. It might be a different picture to understand it as far as a partner may be involved in it. So we're just gonna have to wait and see, what it looks like and what comes back, and the staff. They do. We're very blessed here in Tennessee to have such a great staff that can go through and then bring that to our attention without names. And so I feel very confident that they will come up with a first look and give us some good input.
So Andy, it's to finalize, it's your understanding that Nasba is gathering this information and will be in contact with us. Okay.
And I actually talked to the ED that sits on the board, and he indicated that y'all were probably going to have a call on this very quickly.
Well, there were a lot of questions on the last call that there were no answers for,
Yeah.
so that was,
Well, they were actually, when we were at the board meeting, Dan and Kent were actually talking about that before we even went to the board meeting, and then and then Kent gave a really good update on thoughts. And so I believe that you're going to be on a call very quickly with that. Current trends. I thought this was extremely interesting. I won't go into, I'll give you some of our thought patterns. And so the board still hasn't commented on this or looking kind of to look at it. Remote work versus mobility, exactly what Wendy was talking about. And say they're working on this. There's a lot to come. Changing residence. I mean, just think about how mobility we set it up, and we didn't anticipate anything like a virus and what mobility would look like. So the UAA is discussing that. They're specifically talking about, is the principal place of business the right area? We were in our board meeting, and Wendy was specifically mentioned in the fact that she had suggested that we go ahead and, maybe the states look at having the candidates actually put on their annual renewals or their biannual renewals the place that they contend is their state of license based on their principal place of business. And so, and in that we got the update about the IT changes and the things that they're going to do to make that easier under ALD to lift that up and report it. One of the things was that remote working is not mobility. And so they were very specific about that. But they use Colorado as an example about the concern of a license moves to a state and gets a business and operates a business but remotely considered in another state. And I don't know if you want to tell them kind of how Colorado, what the example was.
I think my problem is without it in front of me, I don't remember exactly, but I remember seeing it at the regional meeting, and I really liked their wording. Yeah. But it was basically somebody who had, let's say, an operation here in Tennessee, and they end up moving to Colorado, and at first their clients are all in Tennessee, and that's where you would think their principal place of business is. But now they're residing and now soliciting clients in Colorado, so there's an expectation that you would get licensed there as well. So I liked at least their wording to look at as an option to help clarify for people what the what the requirement might be. So obviously our requirement or our intention is not to go back to the days of having people get licensed in all sorts of states, but we have to figure out what's reasonable and what we can effectively enforce from a regulatory standpoint.
And I think that the AICPA at first was very opposed to having 2 licenses, period. Mobility is mobility. That's the reason we did it. We want 1 license. And then, after thinking about it, the sky is not falling if you have to get 2, because I can remember at one time I had 4. So I think you're going to hear more discussion in that area. From discussions we had, everybody thought it was really did not make sense to make the default location your residency. It should be your place of business.
And I think as one CPA who at one point had 9 separate licenses, I'm aware of that. I think there are other perspectives as well. If you're a large firm that employs 30,000 people and 15,000 of them are CPAs, and you're responsible as a firm for compliance with your employees, that creates some issues. And typically the larger firms will designate an office domicile as the principal place of business for their employees. And then when they get formally transferred, that designation changes. That may be a different set of facts, though, for a regional firm or a local firm. And the issues are just going to be different, and the management and operational challenges are going to be different. And so there's a lot of moving parts to that.
So I personally we did a long-term rental to 5 young adults from New York, professionals, who were, during this period of their companies allowing them to work remotely, were going from location to location in different states. And so, I think it's something that's going to have to be, so many people are going remote. I don't know. It just needs to be simple, if you ask me. It needs to be very simple because it's a reality. I don't know if they told their employers that they were leaving New York. I don't know. I don't know how you could possibly regulate that kind of thing. So anyway,
been in the news that a lot of remote workers went overseas during the pandemic and all, and that's another situation.
Work in the office, but you can travel.
Oh, you can.
There's an expectation, if you though are a citizen of Tennessee and you start working with a CPA in Tennessee, that person would be licensed here. So I think obviously we want to keep looking back to the public. And, we've had this instance with CPE recently where someone will say, well, we pull them for audit and they say, oh, well, my principal place of business is in Mississippi. Well, okay. So we don't review their CPE, but then they tell Mississippi the same thing. Well, Tennessee's my principal place of business. So they're, in essence, kind of evading the look at the CPE. And so it's not that we want to but we need to make sure that the public knows where they're being regulated at if we're going to continue to be a regulated profession, and then who's responsible for that in that world. So
I think you can see why we're so fortunate to have such a great executive director who, this is a current trend, issues, nobody has an answer for it. And Wendy's doing a fantastic job of communicating our concerns and the issues we're having here in Tennessee, and she's very actively involved in it. And so we thank you for that. Another current trend is just experience on how much experience is necessary to sign an attest engagement. We talked about is it based on your experience in a firm? We had several firms that were there. They talked about how if it was a large firm, that person probably would never be able to sign an attest engagement until they've been there 7 to 9 years. Then we had smaller firms say, well, we have smaller firms and the need there is for a faster experience, but are they competent when they sign that? Do they understand what they're doing? and have they really gone through the necessary education under the attest functions to understand what they are signing, because there's no question that when you look at what the DOL is doing in the audit quality, that usually it's the ones who have the less experience that are causing issues. And so you're probably going to be hearing a lot more about that in the future. That's a topic of kind of discussion. There was a lot of discussion here about a trend for to enhance the use of internships, and a lot of discussion about that. The UK model seems to work with that. To help build a pipeline where you're out, you're in the workforce, and then you're going to that university or college in the afternoon or at night or even virtually. And a lot of comments were made about the fact that, that would really help with diversity needs in our profession. It would also help with the debt from students that they have once they graduate. And so, talk was made, well, hey, how can we do this? We've really got to get the university and colleges on board. And we really need to talk about this additional 30 hours, or, just because they're doing an internship, are they getting the educational requirements they need? And I know a couple of big firms have been talking about bringing students in and then working with the university to create an educational format that would allow them to get those extra hours. But I think what you may see in the future is maybe PhDs coming together and kind of talking about this program and maybe coming up with a concept that we can discuss further. But there is a lot of talk there because of the potential for success with the pipeline, and also for diverse clients, and also debt load. And so that was exciting, just to talk, just to have the conversation with at the board level. We did talk about further with the DOL and the poor audit quality in smaller firms mostly. One person made a comment about, hey, when you talk about audit quality and you talk about the people not showing enough hours billable wise to maybe even do part of the audit, that it really starts, one particular person said, it really starts with the firm's system of internal controls. And that if they have a strong internal control environment, and then their system is strong, then before they do any assurance work, that it seems to suggest that those people have better audit results when they're looked at by DOL. And so there was some talk about saying, hey, maybe we need to change the peer review to where before they issue something, because that you get lost in this 8-year project, and the bad people don't come out till 6 to 8 years, and so they think that that's too long. So you really, at that point, you can find a bad player, but maybe they need to amplify it to where up front there's an upfront look at that firm's system of internal control to ensure that they understand what they're working on. There was a lot of talk about having somebody come out and a peer reviewer coming out and looking at a pre-qualification review of an assurance work. And there doesn't seem to be any peer reviewers that are willing to do that because of the liability that they might incur. And with that said, there was also a concern about the peer reviewer pipeline, that they're having issues right now. And so there's a lot of talk about, hey, maybe we need to look at how we do this, and is there a way that we can automate some of the peer review and to make it easier so there's less travel on those people. And of course, all this talk was kind of prearranged about the fact that, we're expecting a lot more audits given the $750,000 of federal funds in the not-for-profit and for-profit entities that, that we experienced during COVID. And so that was an interesting look about what the profession is seeing and what we're doing as a kind of a future site.
Andy, did the new DOL report come out?
It has not come out yet.
Okay.
But they indicated there had been some improvements. And I'll stop there and say, Larry, is there anything else you'd like to add in that area to anything that you were there too? I'm probably just saving his voice here. He probably could have easily given the same summary.
No, I think you did a great job covering it all, Andy. I can't think of. I have made some notes here, but as you covered them, I checked them all off. So you did a great job.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Larry, both for representing our board on the Nasba Board of Directors, and just appreciate the diligence and the effort that goes into that for both of you. I think we'll go ahead and proceed to Nasba committee updates. And Andy, while you had the floor, is there anything new on the Administrative and Finance Committee?
I would just like to say that I was very impressed that we got a financial report, and Nasba has done a great job of managing through COVID. I think you'll see it on the investment side. I can report that the Nasba has a sound foundation financially. That as they see that revenue decreases because maybe the COVID lockdown with the exams, they actually took actions to cut expenses. As far as the investments have done quite well. Of course, since the 1st of January, there has been some decline on the investment side, but I would point out that unlike the for-profit side where we have held to maturity, available for sale, and trading, as for example, the bank that I work with, the nonprofit side cannot put anything into held to maturity. So the investments, just the interest rate investments, fluctuate dramatically as rates go up. Nasba has the ability and the intent and the liquidity to keep all of their investments. It could have easily elected held to maturity and not reported anything, but they have experiences. Everybody has that has those types of investments a decrease in fair market value. So that goes to the expense report or is a loss, and so. But if you look at the revenue and their expenses and taking the investment portfolio out with the fluctuations, they have done a fantastic job under good leadership to navigate the treacherous times that we experience with lockdowns and things that happen in our profession.
Thanks, Andy. Larry, do you have any comments with respect to the UAA committee?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things there. The biggest thing on the UAA committee's plate right now is mobility. Everybody's kind of looking to us to come up with the answer for that. We have a meeting in August, early August, and I think what we're going to try to do is the first step is just to look at the existing rule and try to clarify some of the things that are in the existing rule, as opposed to changing everything, is to try to just clarify some of the definitions and some of the terms that are in the existing rule to see if it can simplify the process. I don't think anybody really wants to start with square one in trying to remedy this or to solve this issue. And a lot of it's going to be the various states working together when they find a problem. So we'll know better after we meet in August on how that's going to turn out.
Thank you, Larry. Let's see. Audit Committee, Judy, any developments there?
We are about to kick in high gear, but nothing since our last meeting.
And Pam, on the CBT committee, I know we've had some discussions on related topics, but any additional items there?
I've been on the computer-based testing and also was on the transition task force. And so many of the issues have been ongoing and have overlapped between the two committees. So, for example, the model curriculum that came out, we saw that early, and that, if you haven't looked at it much, I mean, it goes through and says which courses schools might need to offer and what would be offered in those courses, and they're not like courses that have traditionally been part of of programs. So I'm just saying that because this is, it has just built, and so that came out, and then evolution came out. So a lot of the discussions have supported all of that has transpired. Most recently, the CBT committee met just a few weeks ago and discussed proposed changes to the UAA, one of which was that 18-month rule, and to nail down that clarification so that it doesn't start until your scores have been released. And then partnering with that, they also proposed a change in the UAA to say you cannot part receive the score. You cannot sit for part until you previous taking of that part, which we already have, right? I mean,
that's already in place.
Yeah. Well, we discussed the wording. It must have just been some refined wording, because I know what it was. It's looking at what does released mean, right?
Oh,
so it's like, is it received by the candidate, or is it released? So it's just nailing down the specific language of that. So that's perhaps not revolutionary, but also there's ongoing discussion just about transition in general with the CBT, and how's that going to look like, and what delays may there be, and that will be ongoing until this has been in place for quite a while. So I think everything else we have already talked about.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Let's see. Greg, if you're with us and able to chat, any updates with respect to the Ethics Committee?
Yes, sir. The Ethics Committee met late yesterday afternoon, or possibly early evening. I'm not sure what they ended up doing, but I was tied up with the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy yesterday, as most of you know. But they met regarding Peak's proposals related to compliance audit definitions and interpretations. And actually, Dan Dustin with Nasba has drafted a response on behalf of Nasba, and I sent that to Wendy earlier today. But looks like we have some good comments on that, on the proposed definitions and interpretations related to compliance audits.
Okay, thank you, Greg. And Janet, any further information on nominating committee?
Well, the nominating committee finished its work for this year, and I believe all of you are aware of the vice chair, Stephanie Saunders, and our directors at large, two of which are, well, one, Andy is with us, and then the regional director, Larry, that were selected. And so I finished up my second year of my 2-year term, so I'm rolling off that committee.
And thank you for your service. That's probably, along with administrative and finance, among the key operating committees that NASBA works with. And then John, I know you and I both serve on the Regulatory Response Committee. Any commentary or updates there from your perspective?
There's been a lot of activity since our last board meeting, and as noted, we generally are sort of the last stop before the chairman and CEO sign off on NASBA's response. Audit or ethical subjects generally are issues and not accounting. 7 comment letters have been issued since May. We had about a 6-meeting stretch in about a 3 or 4 week period. It seemed like all Zoom calls over the last year. Things dealing from the International Code of Ethics to International Ethics Standards Board folks, some technology-related issues, ASCPA Code of Professional Conduct, the SEC rule regarding climate-related disclosures was an interesting one, and so a lot of times the response is drafted by Greg's Ethics Committee or another committee, and then we receive those and consider those responses necessary. The or we will be looking at the NASBA response to the CPA exam. Active committee.
And I'll just add that John is an incredibly high quality and detailed reviewer of the correspondence that we have to assist the NASBA leadership in drafting. So appreciate all the eagle eyes and hard work on those many pieces of correspondence that we're working with. I think that concludes the NASBA updates. And so the next item on our agenda is old and new business. And this is traditionally the meeting where we elect officers for the upcoming year, officers of the board. I think about a couple of weeks ago, Wendy had put out a communication to each of the board members asking them to express whether they had an interest in serving as an officer. And I had indicated to Wendy that I will not have an interest in continuing to serve as chairperson, and wanted to just offer up some commentary on that. At our last meeting a year ago, I thought Greg Gilbert made some incredibly wise comments. And if I can just paraphrase them, Greg, really what he was saying is that when you look at the board and the members on the board, we have an extraordinarily high-quality board that's comprised of very dedicated people that come from a variety of work and personal background experiences. Some big firms, some small firms, some sole proprietors, some in private, some in public. And it's just an extraordinarily well-balanced board. And of course, the law requires us to be balanced geographically among the grand divisions of the state. And I think the point that Greg was making very well was that there are a lot of people, in terms of allowing our board members to grow, a lot of folks here on the board that may desire to be an officer, and we only change them once a year. And so I think he was making the point that it probably would be a good thing to kind of rotate things around a bit, if not formally, at least informally. And that really was some of my guiding thoughts. It's been a tremendous honor to serve as chairperson of this very high-quality board, and to get a chance to work with Wendy and the staff, and with legal, and with the Tennessee Society as well. And so in terms of the response to Wendy's solicitation for officers, Andy Bonner has expressed an interest in serving as chairman, and I believe Larry Elmore has expressed an interest in serving as vice chair. And then we haven't had anyone make an overt expression of wanting to serve as secretary. But what I would, if the board is comfortable with this process of proceeding, what I would recommend that we do is we deal with the chairmanship position first, or the chairperson position first, and get to a choice there, then move to the vice chairperson position, and then move to the secretary position, and just work through those officer selections one at a time, as opposed to as a slate. And so I would ask for a formal nomination. I know, Andy, you've expressed interest in serving as chair. Is there a formal nomination to that effect? And we'll also open the floor up to other nominations if there are any as well.
Mr. Chairman, I would certainly support Andy's nomination as chair, but I'd also like to, on behalf of the board, thank you for your service. You've been an outstanding chairman. The only chairman I've worked with in my 2 years on the board, but I can't imagine anyone being any better, any more diligent, and doing such a great job. So thank you for that. And I know Andy would do an absolutely great.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to second that nomination, and I'd also like to follow up with the comments about yourself there. You've just done a great job. I mean, I think as all of us know, we've faced a lot of controversial topics and controversial agenda items over the last couple of years, and you handled them all with grace, and you managed to take hard topics and turn them into something that we could manage easily. So I appreciate your service, and I would second the nomination for chair for Andy.
Thank you very much for both your comments. We have a motion and a second for Andy. Are there any other nominations that board members would like to make for the chairperson position? Hearing none, I would say that the nominations are closed, and Andy, you will be our chair by acclamation. So congratulations to you, Andy.
I just want to say thank you to the board, and it's quite an honor to be considered in that and to be voted in that position. I have to agree with two others that have stated. Kevin, you have done an unbelievably good job. I think you as a person that we've gotten to know is just such a loving, caring, great person to be around. And you bring that to every meeting. You wear a lot of things on your shoulders, and one of them is your personality and your beliefs. And I do believe that you have done a fantastic job leading this board, and some big shoes to fill. I'm not sure I can fill them to that extent, but you have done an outstanding job, and I just thank you for your leadership.
You're very welcome, Andy, and congratulations on the upcoming chairpersonship for your role. And with these very kind comments, I'll do my best to squeeze my fat head out the door here. But I appreciate all the kind comments. So we'll now move to the position of vice chair, and Larry Elmore has expressed to Wendy an interest in serving as vice chair. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
We have that motion. Thank you, Judy. Is there a second?
I will second that.
There's a second by Andy. And are there any other nominations for the position of vice chair of the board that anyone would like to put up for consideration? Hearing none, we'll close nominations. And Larry, congratulations. You are vice chair by acclamation.
I'd like to say that I'm very gracefully giving up the position of secretary to anyone who feels worthy of filling that role. So all of you are very qualified, I'm sure, so I'm sure we'll come up with a good candidate.
All right. Sorry that you don't want to do both roles there, Larry. I'm not sure that's even statutorily permissible here. But congratulations on serving in the vice chair role going forward. And now we'll turn to the position of secretary, which Larry has ably fulfilled this past year. Are there any nominations for the position of secretary? I'll join in at once here.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Greg Gilbert as secretary.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by John. And Greg, are you willing to serve if selected by the board?
I think Wendy will confirm that I told her that if no one else chooses to do that, I would accept it. But it's not an office that I particularly want to do, but I'm glad to do it if the board is so inclined.
Well, you know what they say about leadership. Sometimes great leaders don't seek it. They have it thrust upon them. We have a motion and a second for Greg. Are there any other nominations for the position of secretary?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would note that though I'm glad to serve in that position, that would put all members of the executive committee from the East Tennessee Grand Division. So I would just encourage the board to think that through.
Understood.
I'm fine with that.
It looks like the board members that are here, Greg, have carefully considered that and appear to be fine with that outcome. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I call the nominations for the position of secretary to be closed. And Greg, you are our new secretary by acclamation. So congratulations and thank you in advance for the work. So just for folks that are viewing, among the other duties of secretary here is they are charged with the high privilege of reviewing the drafts of the minutes that are prepared by staff, but also re-reviewing the video of the committee and board meetings to attempt to make sure that the drafts are faithfully reflective of the actual commentary here. So, Greg, we wish you
Mr. Chairman, that's the great thing about being secretary. You get to observe the meeting twice.
Greg, we're glad you're going to be doing that for all of us next year. I think we've taken care of the election of officers. The last item under old and new business that's listed is formation of committees. Now, traditionally, what we've done in the past is we've asked members who have an expression of interest to serve on a committee or to lead as chairperson of a committee to let Wendy know, and then she'll apprise, in this case, Andy is the new chairperson of the board, and they'll work through the committee selection process so that we'll be ready to roll by the next meeting that we have later on in the late summer or fall. Are folks still comfortable with that approach? Okay. Is there any other old or new business to come before the board?
Just
Yes, Pam.
say something very quickly. I thought it was really very nice. Back in May, Carnival Memphis recognized our profession. John, you're familiar with that? Were you at the luncheon? I thought so. Anyway, his firm was recognized. But Carnival Memphis each year chooses a profession industry to recognize, and used to it was the cotton industry, but now it's a particular industry. And this year it was accounting, and I was not familiar with how this was done, but it turned out there were 400 people at this lunch. They recognized colleges, they recognized firms, and specific firms, and they recognized individuals, and it was really a walk down memory lane for me, and I'm sure it was for you too, John, the people that they had there who spoke. But it was so gratifying and encouraging to me to hear all the stories that were told. And talk about thrust upon someone. A lot of stories were about how parents had thrust accounting upon students when they were in college, when they wanted to study something else. But a lot of gratitude to our profession by the community, but also by the members of the profession for what the profession had done for them, and how they had benefited, of course, from the people in the profession, but that they had found a career that had been so interesting to them, and had offered stability, and it just sounded exciting for our profession going forward. Would you agree with that, John?
I thought it was a great, it's just a one time, I think, because the current,
that's right,
my understanding, Carnival chairman got to pick, and it was
there was a little bit of influence.
Yeah, it was actually a CPA, with the firm in Memphis who said, I want to honor accounting, and so that was sort of the genesis of it. But it was a great event and very well attended.
It really was, and we talk about numbers going down and the number setting, et cetera, but this would give you a lot of hope for our profession and confidence in the role that it plays in society.
That's great. Thank you, Pam. Any other items, old or new?
Mr. Chairman, I have one. I'm not sure of the proper protocol here, but I generally don't print out things to bring with me, but I did, and I just happened to look down a few minutes ago, or a little while ago, and the May minutes reflected Todd Skelton was in attendance, and David was not on there, and I'm not sure. I know we approved them, so I'm not sure what we have to do, but I just happened to notice that.
Yeah, let's just do one last quick motion, if we may, to correct the previously approved minutes to reflect David's we're grateful for David's presence, and although we missed Todd, he was not in attendance at that meeting. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll go ahead and second it.
Okay, we've got a second there. I will need a roll call, I guess. So, Karen, if you'll call the roll on that. Thank you, Mr. Eagle Eyes, John, for catching that.
Honor.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Nasba.
Aye.
Craig Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Lynn Monroe.
Aye.
Aye.
Rob Vance. Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you, John. There being no further business, I'll declare this meeting to be adjourned. Thank you, and everybody have safe travels home. You're so very welcome.
Greg Gilbert.
This meeting is no longer being
Is now
recorded or
exiting.
transcribed.